32 people.
It's showtime. We are live. Hello, everybody.
Good evening.
Good
Good
evening.
evening this time. We thought we'd try a different slot, which we hope will be a lot better for viewers in different territories. As you're probably aware, it's difficult to please every territory, but we're hoping this will be a little bit better on time-wise, yeah?
Yeah, so it's a lot different for us. Usually we're getting up on a Sunday morning and doing this, but this time it is 12 hours later at 9 p.m. So let us know in the comments where you're coming in from. This is going to be a lot better for the people from our home country, which is the UK. So hopefully we've got a couple of recognisable faces tuning in. Let's start off with telling everyone what we've been up to this weekend.
So, okay, this Saturday morning we went to a sort of more rural area. It's actually an area, it's about 3 hours away from Shanghai by car.
Shenzhen.
From Shenzhen by car. And it's in Meizhou City. Although it's not Meizhou, it's in a smaller, I guess we would refer to it in the UK as a town in Meizhou. We went there and it was a much more rural area. A lot of people have been suggesting that we should show some more rural China. So we will be doing a couple of videos of our time there. But we had an interesting experience.
Just before you talk about that, that's the first. I've been here like a year and a month now, and I've been to Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Shanghai, and a couple of other of the biggest cities in China. And I was very keen to visit and see somewhere that is not, a tier 1 city, because obviously, people are aware of the, super futuristic cities and the sort of skyscrapers and the fast railway, the high-speed railway and stuff. But people don't really get to see what most of China's actually like. So we were keen to go, and we filmed a couple of videos so that you can sort of see what it's like.
Yeah, so the main thing is that the way of life is a lot different to the city. So they are sort of, a lot of the people who live in here, they have a house that's built. It was generally an older population, as many of the sort of sons and daughters will work, because it's a fairly what's considered to be close proximity to Shenzhen. You'll get the grandparents who live in these villages, in towns in Meizhou, and their sons and daughters will work in Shenzhen, maybe go back at the weekend or once or twice a month. So it generally be the grandparents who are living in a house in these places. And often, but not always, they may be looking after the grandchildren in there. But their sort of way of life consists of that they probably have a property, probably without rent or mortgage.
Which is something very different to most people in the UK.
And they will tend to animals. They will grow a lot of vegetables. So it's kind of common for people to keep chickens, ducks, geese, and also they will grow a variety of vegetables. So they will live to a certain extent off the land, and they will spend a lot of their time doing that. Because
very self-sufficient.
There's very little work in these areas. What sort of jobs there are, it's people who have little businesses, but generally there's no big employers in these areas.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for everyone tuning in right now. Going to give a few shout outs to people that are joining us. We've got Hannah Yu, Karina Royuki. Again, sorry, I can't pronounce everybody's names perfectly, especially the Chinese names.
Yin Hu Ko, who always seems to tune into our live chats. Thanks for coming in.
We're seeing a couple of familiar faces here. David Dewell, I'm glad to be supporting you and Ollie on Patreon. Thank you very much. We do appreciate that. One thing that would be extremely helpful for anybody watching right now is if you do hit the share button down below and give it a like as well, because that will help us sort of spread the message on the live browse section on YouTube. So that would be excellent if you were able to do
Rush
that.
Sherwood, I picked up from you. You're quite a commenter in our comment section on our videos. Appreciate that.
Oliver Wu as well. Hello from the UK. Hello,
Oliver.
From Shenzhen. We share a name as well. Brian Washington, Yo Yu Chi, Mine Ray. Thank you everybody for joining. So yeah, we've literally just come back in the door from like 15 minutes ago. It's a 3-hour journey, and luckily we're able to make it back just in time.
Yeah, we're a sort of little bit later leaving because we had a bit of an incident just before we left. So what happened before we left, we wanted to do a video in a sort of the kind of town center where it was a little bit busier. So we started recording. Now, what you have to bear in mind, although Oliver does speak a little bit of Mandarin, I speak less. But in this area, most people don't speak Mandarin. They speak their sort of local dialect, which is Hakkawa or Meijiwa. And so we went into the town, and the friends we were with, they started hearing locals sort of getting a bit sort of anxious, and, oh, there's some foreigners there, be careful, because obviously in the heads of a lot of Chinese at the moment, they see that China to some extent has got the COVID-19 virus under control, but they don't seem to think that the rest of the world has it under control. And there's probably good reason for that, because they see that the virus is sort of rampant in a lot of foreign countries. But because of that, they're really, really nervous of foreigners. So we start doing our video, walking around. All of a sudden, there's like 6 police around. The car pulls up, 6 or 8 police jump out, and they surround us, and they're quite agitated. They're asking lots of questions to the people who are with us. Obviously, we can't understand at this point what's going on, but they're all surrounding us. Yeah, what do you think, Ollie? What happened then?
Yeah, I was a bit. I just kind of blinked, and then all of a sudden it was all happening. Yeah, we were just walking down the town street, filming a video, just sort of talking about the differences between living in a city and in a rural area. And then this sort of happened, and then they asked us to. We arrived in a car, so they asked us to go back to the car and follow them to the police station. At this point, we weren't really aware what was going on. I had sort of presumptions in my head of whatever, but they did actually turn out to be wrong in the end. It was kind of it's protocol that if you are visiting another city or another area at this time, you do need to let the authorities know when you are going to be leaving.
It's not just at this time, it's any time.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So normally, as a foreigner, you don't think about it, because 99% of the time when a foreigner goes to a different area, they check into a hotel. Yeah. And as part of that check-in process, they have your passports, and they record your residency. The reason why hotels have passports is they record your residency with the local authorities.
Right.
Yeah. Now, because we were staying at a friend's house, obviously the friend didn't do that. We are meant to do that. So, if you go to Shanghai and stay in a hotel, as soon as you check into that hotel records with the authorities your residency at that place in Shanghai. And that's the same as if you go anywhere else. But that's not just while the virus is on. That's at any time. And that's why you need your passport.
Right. So,
but obviously, we stayed at a friend's house. We didn't do that. So that was their concern. I suspect what had happened is a number of locals had made a phone call to the police station because they were nervous about seeing foreigners. You got to bear in mind, this area where we were probably doesn't see foreigners really, even when there's no virus about.
Yeah, this is a really rural area, and as well, the sort of, it's probably a presumption, but the highly educated people, most of them will migrate to the cities.
Yeah.
So here you might have a bit of ignorance with the fact that China closed its borders to foreigners sort of 4 weeks ago now, and therefore the likelihood of a foreigner sort of bringing the virus back in now is a lot lower than a lot of people would sort of presume, or sort of have these negative sort of thoughts towards foreigners, even though I
don't think it's negative thoughts. I think it's thoughts that at the moment, sort of the older population in China, the people out of the cities in these areas where they don't see foreigners, from a point of view of the media they get,
exactly,
is that foreigners are the people at the moment with the carrying the virus, even though that's a perception. The reality is that most of the people coming back into China are Chinese nationals,
right?
Because for the last 4 weeks, foreigners have not been allowed in. But their perception is that foreigners are more dangerous than Chinese people because they're more likely to be carrying the virus. Whereas in reality, that's not the case, because foreigners who are now here have had to be here for at least 4 weeks. But the understanding's still not there by a lot of Chinese people.
Just before I add on to that, thank you very much for the $10 there. Thank you for your donation. I'm sorry I'm not able to read your name. Once I learn better out Mandarin, I'll have no problem with that. Sorry, where were we then?
Just talking about we got taken to the station, and I suspect the initial sort of reaction of the police was based around the virus, but once we got to the police station, they sort of explained to the people with that actually it's, we weren't registered. So actually when we got there, it was literally a quick 10 minutes. They took our passports, they registered us there. They could clearly see we hadn't just entered China, and we'd been there for some time, and pretty much all was wrapped up pretty quickly. And they were sort of saying, look, we don't take this wrong, we're just following our protocol.
They were actually really nice in the end.
They gave us water, they offered us tea and everything, and literally within about 10 minutes we were back on our way once that sort of misunderstanding was cleared up.
And like you said in the car, you said I'm sure that wouldn't have been as straightforward without the others' help who are Chinese. So
I think if we'd have been there on our own without our friends who can speak the local dialect, it would have probably been a much more complex situation. But as I say, it was all done. I can completely understand it. It is a little bit of an inconvenience, but not that much. I think the authorities are more understanding than the actual local people. As I said before, what you got to remember is a lot of those local people are quite elderly people. A lot of them can't even speak Mandarin. They have probably, a lot of them haven't been out of their sort of city to bigger cities. So I can understand the sort of nervousness of foreigners coming in when they think that foreigners are carrying the virus.
I did actually make a video, which you may or may not have seen recently, about sort of my take on the discrimination issue in China. And I did try to sort of keep it as objective and as balanced as I can. And that is the most recent video that's been uploaded before this live stream. So if you wanted to check that out, because that didn't, we made an error on the thumbnail with it. So the way the YouTube algorithms work, it didn't really sort of get pushed out as much as some of our other videos do. But it'd be interesting to hear all of your take on that. We are reading all of the comments, and some of them do offer some really good sort of angles of looking at it.
Absolutely they do. Yeah, I mean it shows us, and I understood this was happening once the pandemic broke out in China, that a lot of Chinese abroad were facing discrimination. But I had probably underestimated by just how much. We've had a lot of comments from sort of Chinese who are studying or living abroad saying they've really got a lot of discrimination against them, even well before the virus broke out. And my sort of take on this is that I think this is really stirred up by the Western media. And I've seen a report, I think earlier today, that is saying, look, since the virus broke out, the Western media have become super negative now, which really doesn't help Chinese people who are abroad. I think, they are getting attacked simply because the media is creating this sort of hatred towards China by all the negative stories. And I sort of also read today that, as part of the re-election campaign in the US, they're kind of using China as the thing that's going to tip the election one way or another. It's like almost a fight over who's going to be most negative or hard line against China is suspected they will win the election. I think that's really sad, to be honest, that they fight election campaign on that.
It's such a strange sort of era to be living in. It's like talking to people here and then talking to people that are in England who haven't seen the other side. It's like the thinking and the perspective is just like totally different, isn't it?
It is, absolutely.
And it creates this kind of it does create a kind of a disconnect, because I think a lot of people in the West who don't see the other side, they assume, especially if it's anyone who's Chinese who is sticking up for their own country, they will assume, brainwashed. No, they're just brainwashed. And I suppose it does give us a bit more credibility when it's we're not a Chinese person here giving that side of the story. But even then, people will believe what they want to believe. And some people will just refuse, because they've been pushed to them for so many years on the media, this anti-China sentiment. It's hard to change that. And you can see why within the country it does bolster up the nationalism, because a lot of them will see it as it's us against the world kind of thing. Like everyone's against us, and a lot of them probably don't have a clue why, because I think a lot of it does come down to the economics, which is like between the US and the
I mean, I have my own thoughts on that. I mean, I see that, since the current president was elected, the anti-China thing has really ramped up. And I think that's because they had a sort of plan to sort of suggest that, they were getting a bit nervous that China was becoming economically stronger. They're starting to compete on a lot of technologies, and even in certain technology areas, overtake the US. And I think they've got very nervous of that. But now I think it's got to the point where they're just, creating just so many falsehoods to sort of turn the population anti-Chinese.
One of the things that you said in a call we were having with the family the other day, which I hadn't really thought about, was one thing they seem to really jump on is the not having free speech, quotation marks, free speech, and saying that they're a dictatorship, a very oppressive society. And one of the things that you mentioned was about they jump on that to use that as the anti-China sentiment. However, they very much support a country who are probably much more oppressive than China.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if you look at from a point of view of Saudi Arabia, in my opinion, are one of the most regimes in the world, but they're massively supported by the US. And I believe that there's one reason only for that, is that Saudi Arabia spend billions upon billions of dollars each year on weapons, armaments, fighter planes with the US. And a lot of the US economy, in my opinion, is based on arms and weapons. So if you look at where the US invaded Iraq, that brought huge amounts of money into those companies. I feel the US economy is built a lot on supplying weapons and armaments around the world, and to a certain extent that the British is, and there's been lots of criticism that actions that have been taken by Saudi Arabia, there's a kind of blind eye turn towards them, because they're still spending lots and lots of money on arms with those Western
how
nations.
often do you see that Saudi Arabia in the media is such an oppressive society and what have you? I'd say I'm not a massive reader of news, but I've never seen anything like to do
It's in the media, or it is, but it's kind of fringe media. It's never pushed in the
same way as what they sort of use for China being such a bad place.
Right, yeah.
I mean, it's strange because.
But you've also got to realise, and one of the commenters here, Brian Washington's made a they upset Saudi Arabia too much. America are probably pretty dependent on the oil, because obviously it's all denominated in dollars. Huge amounts of oil comes from Saudi Arabia. They don't want to be upset there, and deep down, they justified going into Iraq on these weapons of mass destruction. Nothing was ever found yet. Was it really? There's a lot of theory that they went in for oil. And I feel this is kind of like they bash China, but they never bash these regimes which are more oppressive, in my opinion, than the Chinese regime.
Our friend Daniel Dunbrill does a great video outlining the the straw man of this virus being made in a lab in Wuhan, which
I mean, this is just, again, it's like they
once they've come up with evidence beyond all unreasonable doubt that it didn't come from the wet market, which they were first jumping on, it's now changed to something else.
It's and sadly what happened is you get this small amount of story that isn't actually corroborated at all. There's no hard evidence yet. It very quickly spreads to all the national media in America, and they all parrot the same thing. So what happens, even if later it turns up as, actually there was no evidence that it's not true, it's too late then.
Yeah, it's too late.
Because it's already in the heads of all the people, because it's been pushed out so widely in the mainstream media.
Yeah, it's crazy how much you can be manipulated.
It really is. It really is. Right, I just want to move on to something that one of our Patreons asked a question. So it's talking about contact tracing. Now, China were very quick with the virus to get contact tracing up, and it became a national thing. They have big companies like Tencent and Alibaba, big technology companies. And I believe for the national system here, they used a ride-hailing service, a bit like Uber in the States. They have a company here called Didi, and they piggybacked onto some of their technology to start the contact trace. It was a national system. I believe it was used by GPS. They also had another system which was a partnership, between the mobile phone companies using the GPS data. And I see that was one of the biggest factors in actually controlling the virus, because what they're able to do, as soon as they found somebody with it, they were very quick to contact trace all the contacts through the various systems they had, through central databases, and then isolate those people, quarantine the people. Now, it seems as though that other countries want to do this, and it seemed to be the way that this virus can be brought under control and stop it spreading in the community. But the other countries outside of China are turning away from this simply because they're fearing privacy. There's a lot of people say, we don't want the government knowing our whereabouts and that. So they go into a more local sort of system. And I don't really know if that local system will work. I'm not familiar with all the technicalities of it, but it works on a Bluetooth thing. So you've got to be pretty close. Whereas the national system here in China, that there was a sort of central, each province had a system, but I think there was also then a central system which was based on top of Alibaba's platform with Alipay. And they had some AI that changed the codes from red to green to orange. If you come into contact with a person who was confirmed to be a carrier, your code may then turn orange, because they've got this national kind of database. It assess the risk of areas you travel to. You know, if there were higher risk areas, it might change your code to orange. Whereas with this,
bear in mind, everyone might not know what the code is as well. So the health code you're talking about is in China. If you do want to visit somewhere, you know, some places are more relaxed than others, but especially if you're going into somewhere that's busy or a tourist destination, or you're trying to travel between provinces or something like that, you do need a health code, which is a QR code, a sort of third-party app within WeChat, where it will use this algorithm to show if you have been in contact with someone who's been infected, or you've been infected yourself, or you've been to high risk areas.
But it seems the sort of Western model is this very sort of local sort of contact tracing, where actually the central government won't know of areas of outbreak. It will be much more of a localized thing, and that's really down to that. I believe it's Google and Apple are developing this, and they spoke to a number of government agencies in many different countries while they're developing this, and it seems that those countries didn't want a centralized sort of database because they feared the population wouldn't accept the government knowing their whereabouts, which I actually think is crazy, really. You know, I'd rather have the government knowing my whereabouts if it's going to potentially save my life or other lives. And the other thing I think that is crazy about it, actually, there's a lot of applications on phones which are sending that location data back to people like Facebook and you know, all these people who use these check-in apps to say, oh, you know, so and so is now at this restaurant with blah blah blah. They're using that tracking. You know, and yet the people thinking, oh, I don't want the government using that. Now, it could be very easy that once this is all over, the government could delete that data. And personally, I think unless you're doing something wrong, I don't really see what the problem is with the government knowing your whereabouts, especially if they can use that then to protect you or protect others if you have come into contact with a positive COVID-19 person. You know, I just think it's a bit mad.
I will add on to that. I just want to thank MWLI 1984 for the super sticker. Thank you very much for that. We've got another question in which we'll go on to in a second. I just want to say that, it's strange. This it's weird because I can see the other side of it. Like these people that are all about this privacy, no matter what, sort of, even if it's good, even if they probably know, most people know that that's probably going to be a good thing for their health, and it's more likely that they're going to save people in their nation if they do contact tracing. But especially in America, where, you know, it's one of the, I don't know which amendment it is, and in the West in general, it's a massive deal to have your privacy. So I think people see it as encroaching on your rights, taking away your rights.
What was kind of funny here actually is, like, before this COVID-19 pandemic broke out in China, many Westerners thought that the government tracked all Chinese citizens wherever they went. So if that was the case, they wouldn't have needed to develop these apps. But it was blatantly obvious that once this broke out, the Chinese weren't tracking everybody because they didn't know where people were. That's why quickly they approached people like Tencent, Alibaba, Didi. So look, get together. We need a contact tracing app for pretty much. Obviously, it's not going to cover 100% of the population because there probably are a few older people who don't have mobile phones and stuff like that. But most of the population have. But they went to these. But the difference here is that they got it up and running very, very quickly, which I see that the sort of contact tracing and testing and quarantine, and they're now moving back to that because they see this is the only way of controlling it. You know, that's the only way you're going to do it.
It's mad. People are saying, like, I think people are starting to really realize now that this is not a 1 month, a 2 month problem, and then everything's going to go back to normal. People who think that are living in fantasy world, because this is not something that, again, I mentioned last time. It's like, what is normal now? It's like, I think things are going to open back up eventually, but I don't think things are going to go back to what people call normal. I think this is going to change how people go forward in their businesses and how they I'm thinking about what about personal contact?
Yeah. Well, something I've noticed here now in Shenzhen, I would suggest most people are back at work now. The schools they're debating when to open the schools, but I think this is going to happen very soon, it seems. However, today there's been an announcement in Beijing that they're closing return, especially Chinese nationals returning from Russia, are being found to be positive for COVID-19. And in Harbin, there's been a lockdown, which Harbin is in the province that borders Russia. So there is still a lot of nervousness. But what I've noticed is that people have changed the sort of way far more quieter. So I see that many more people are using their own cars to travel around now. So there's less people using public transport. The other big thing I noticed, although sort of a lot of shopping centres, that there's people around in them and that, whereas before people would go to work, they would leave work, they would probably then go and eat in restaurants and go shopping. I think more people are doing less social activities at the moment after work. They're probably finishing work and more likely going home rather than going shopping or to restaurants. And I think that's just because there's still some sort of nervousness that it isn't completely eradicated here. There's some nervousness that it could kick back off. So people are still sort of a little anxious about social situations, mixing and things like that.
That's just as far as like public transport goes and restaurants. But what about like big events as well? Like, how long is it going to be before people have the confidence to go to arenas, big enclosed environments with thousands of people, artists who have got sold out arenas?
I think it's going to take some time.
Even cinemas, it's like, it's going to be a long time until people get the confidence to go back to these places. And then that means those businesses are going to be struggling. Obviously not the ones who are like artists, they're going to be okay. But things like cinemas and sort of smaller environments where there's a lot of people grouping together, those businesses are especially going to be really hurt. We've been delaying this question for a long time. Noobish Pinky, what are your thoughts about minority being prosecuted in China, especially the Uyghurs?
Prosecuted, I think maybe you mean persecuted. So there's this kind of narrative that goes around in Western press that minorities are sort of oppressed here. And the one that's always brought up is Uyghurs. Now, I can tell you, I actually know a couple of people who, they're not living in Xinjiang at the moment.
I'm just going to get more water.
They are from Xinjiang. And the people that have been put into these, let's say, I know they're called detention camps and things in the West, but they are actually re-education facilities where there's a lot of these people, and they were put in here. So if when the police had suspicions they were linked to terrorist organizations or terrorist groups, or even just involved with anything that was sort of spreading anything to do with terrorism, they'd have their phones searched, they'd have their houses searched, they'd have their computers looked at. And if anything was found, they would be taken to these sort of places, kind of like prisons, to kind of have those thoughts taken away from them. So they were encouraged to learn Mandarin to integrate with society. But that's not to say this is only there. There are many Muslim Uyghurs in various parts. When I lived in Guangzhou, there's a thriving Uyghur community there. They keep themselves to themselves. They run their businesses, and they make positive contributions to society. So I think this notion that they're all sort of, minorities are sort of discriminated against is not actual fact. And also, I know practicing Christians here. One of the videos we are going to do, there's a big church in Shenzhen, and it's a Christian church. And if you look at things like mosques, there are probably more mosques in China than probably many other countries. Another fact that when China introduced the one-child policy, that didn't apply to minorities. That only applied to Han Chinese people. So I think this sort of shows you that there isn't this mass discrimination against minorities, because if there was, then, they wouldn't allow those minorities to have more choice. If they wanted to wipe a minority out, why would they not give that one-child policy? Why wouldn't they implement it to those minorities? They didn't.
Yeah. There's definitely that, and no doubt the Western media probably portray it in the worst way possible. However, I've got to say, we don't know the exact truth. And like you said, there is someone there that you have been in contact with that hopefully, because we are planning to go there, you may or may not know, we did a poll on our community section recently asking, we gave 4 places of where we're thinking of going in China soon. And Xinjiang was one of them, and that was the most voted. And it had like the poll in total had about 3,500 votes, and it was over 50% for Xinjiang, wasn't it?
It was, yes.
So this is clearly a place which a lot of people are curious to know more about this area, and I'm included in that. I really don't know the truth, and I have no concept of what this area is going to be like. Obviously, it's going to come with its difficulties when it comes to filming and things like that, and even more so when it's during this virus. So we're putting that off for a little bit, but it's definitely on the list to visit.
Well, we're looking at probably September, October time, because we've been advised by a lot of Chinese people it's a better time to visit. But I think before that, we are going to go to Chongqing, aren't we? Because that was second on the list. So we might do Chongqing first, and then after that, we will do Xinjiang. Now, one of the reasons, Ollie's just mentioned that it is more sort of difficult to film in Xinjiang. Now, we are aware of that. But I think one of the reasons that is the case is because there's been Western journalists go there and, report very negatively. And an example of this, we know another YouTuber called Alex Absolute. And he's recently done a story where an American reporter wanted to interview one of his friends, and they agreed to the interview. The friend gave the interview, and then when the report came out, when the interview came out in the American media, it was like completely different to the way the interview went. They took things really out of context. They distorted all the story.
That is so manipulative.
And it really, upset the people who gave the interview, because they were giving an interview in the sort of knowledge that it would be reported how the interview went. And it gave a totally different sort of angle on how the interview went. So it just shows you how, these journalists can twist things to support the narrative of what they want to push.
And not only that, they would twist it in a way. Look, it's not the journalists' best. It's not in their best interest to make the world a peaceful place and to bring countries together. Their goal is to make money. So in the end, it's a business. And what lots of statistics have found and lots of research has found is that people click on stuff that provokes a negative response out of them. So if it's getting clicked on and the algorithms are showing that more things are getting clicked on that people have a negative reaction to, and they want to comment and engage and put their own point of view, and it's just going to encourage the algorithm to push more negative content to those people. And then the adverts are getting watched and everyone's happy because everyone's getting paid. Whereas at the same time, this is, pulling everyone apart at the expense of this. So as media is getting sort of encroaching on everyone's lives more and more, it's as if like countries are being pulled apart more and more.
Yeah,
because that is the way how it is nowadays.
But it's because, you know, I see that when certain European countries, and some are more active at this, and the US, they've been very critical of China, and I wonder whether that is simply to hide their own sort of inadequacies in dealing with it. And what a lot of people tend to forget is that when the virus first broke out and started spreading here in China, it was brand new. Nobody knew nothing about it. Yet by the time it reached the US and Europe, there was already 2 months knowledge about that. And, you know, a lot of people say China didn't share that information, that China wouldn't let US in. But actually, there's already US staff working at the CDC here in China who were giving reports back to the American administration on a daily basis. So how the US can now say that they didn't receive information from China about what was going on, I think that is not true, because America actually had, I think it was about 17 or 18 people, CDC people, working in the Chinese CDC here, which was sending back information on a daily basis. So I just see that a lot of this is created because they have not contained it well themselves. They have done a poor job. So it's like, oh, we need to deflect from you know, our population, that we haven't done a very good job. How can we deflect? Oh, let's keep blaming someone else.
Yeah, what it's all about is the population, isn't it? What the media is all sort of thinking is the main priority, really, because if everyone starts turning against their own country, then, you know, that's how revolts happen. Anyway, we need to move on. We've got a couple of super chats in. I just want to thank you all for the super chats that are coming in. If you do want to ask us a question, you can drop a super chat down there, and we will, as you can see, we are answering them thoroughly. So if you want anything sort of talked about, then get them in as soon as possible. Also, people have been asking that there are some Chinese that can't contribute on YouTube. So there is a link to our WeChat code down below. And if anyone is supporting over there, thank you very much as well.
Excuse me.
Dumb Dun, interesting name. I am in Portland. American knows nothing about Chinese American. Western media are super racist and arrogant. They literally lied. American use their people to go against a certain group of people. What do you think?
Yeah, this is like, we've actually kind of been talking about this. It is, and I think, you know, that every other day or every day on our sort of comments in our videos, we hear from, and especially the one Ollie did about discrimination, we hear from Chinese people all over the world that are getting discriminated against. And, you know, it's not just verbal discrimination. They are finding physical discrimination. People are getting attacked.
That's one thing that I think is different between here and in the West. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's absolutely right. You know, people, Chinese in Western countries, are actually getting physically attacked. You know, and some of these Chinese people maybe haven't been to China for years. You know, they're living in those countries, or they've studied in those countries, been there for a long time, simply because they are Chinese. Now, the other thing that's happening is most Westerners can't tell the difference between, you know, Chinese, other Southeast Asians. So you find a lot of Southeast Asian people living abroad are getting attacked. And this, you know, the one thing I think this is down to is that the media is stirring up this hatred towards, you know, China, and all these Chinese citizens and other Southeast Asian citizens are bearing the brunt of this abroad because they're getting attacked by the people, which is really, really sad.
Yeah, obviously that's just obvious. Two wrongs don't make a right, and it is happening here as well. But I don't hear so much people getting attacked because the authorities are way more harsh on things like physical assaults and things that the charges put against you and the consequences are much worse. So you see a lot less of that, I think, from what I've seen and heard anyway. But you're getting it in different forms. Authorities have been handing out sort of notices to people. One thing I did want to talk about is, did I mention last week about the guy who owns the pizza restaurant? Anyway, there's this guy who owns a pizza restaurant in Guangzhou and Shenzhen. And in Guangzhou, he was ordered by authorities to no longer let foreigners in, and quote marks, especially black people, which is obviously racially profiling people. And as he's a foreigner as well, he didn't take this very well, understandably. So he offered a sort of formal letter back to authorities, basically giving them the middle finger and saying, look, we've been brought up in a society where we would never racially exclude people. And therefore, I would rather have my business shut down than to go through with that, which is a brave stance to take. But, he did say morals over profits. So you are seeing it happen in both nations, all nations.
However, like you sort of pointed out in your video, and more comes to light, it is the African situation in Guangzhou specifically is a very, very complex.
However, that wasn't just, that was all foreigners, they said. So and that was a couple of weeks ago now. So things have kind of progressed, and I haven't seen as much sort of videos and clips popping up into group chats as I did 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Certainly in Shenzhen, the authorities here have actually sent out stuff to promote, don't discriminate against foreigners, basically.
It seems like it's been much better in Shenzhen than obviously the situation in Guangzhou.
Sort of my take on it is that a lot of factors come together in Guangzhou to kind of create a perfect storm. And things kicked off. But there's a lot of reasons behind that, which we have discussed previously, so we're not going to go into it again today. I think there's another
from Trevor Norman. We often see you in here, so thank you again for the support. More CCTV in the UK per capita of population than China. Do you think we need more tracking? I do at the moment. Yeah, that's true. In London, it's got one of the highest amount of surveillance cameras per capita.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting. Something I want to bring up on this. One of our Shanghai videos recently, I saw a couple of comments in there. Oh, look at the amount of surveillance cameras. So when the cameras are in the city in China, they're surveillance cameras. But when those same people talk about cameras in the West, they're security cameras. I think this is a very distinction.
One word.
Now, if you speak to the majority, if not all of Chinese people, they have no issue with cameras, and their take on it that you've only got to be worried about those cameras if you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing. And I probably agree on that. I mean, I think, and not just now, for many, many years, I've had that same thing. I'm all for cameras. I've been a victim of crime a couple of times in the UK. I had a retail premises which I had things stolen from. I had a house which was burgled, and the crime rate in China in most cities is way lower than what it is in Western cities, and I put that down to that there are a lot of cameras. So if something is done, there'll more than likely be a camera sort of recording that event. But although maybe what I'm going to say now is pretty controversial, I don't believe the Chinese government are constantly watching people all the time. I don't think they have an interest to do that. I don't think they have the resources to do that. Where they are doing is that if you are wanted for a crime, and because everybody in China has an ID card, they will put your details into that system, and it will flag you up if then you pass a camera. So most of these cameras that do the tracking are at sort of ports, airports, train stations, things like that. So obviously it will then alert the authorities to that somebody who is on their wanted list, so to speak, is at this particular port, train station, airport, and then that police can be alerted and go. Now, personally, I think that's a great thing. And interestingly, a few months ago, there was a fairly high-ranking police officer in the UK who suggested that it would make it far easier in the UK to fight crime if they had a similar system. And I believe they've implemented this technology at football stadiums and places like this. But there's a lot more pushback from the general population in Western countries as there is here.
However, we saw before, if you've got cameras that can scan your face and have it next to your passport photo, etc. Here it's like, oh my god, what a dictatorship.
Yeah.
But in the West they do that and they're like, wow, that's great for security. I've got two things to share about this camera thing. One is a story that happened a few months ago, and second is sort of another take on it. The first one is, it's about a phone. So I went to a football just sort of a little football tournament in the center of the city a few months ago. And one of my friends lost his phone. It was just on an AstroTurf. If you had this exact situation in most Western countries, I know for example, in the UK, if I lost my phone on the AstroTurf, that's it, it's gone. You can ask around. That's the most you can do. Here, they had several cameras. You need to pause that because people are saying it lags when that's on.
Oh, okay.
So people are saying, well, where was I? Yeah, so we were just at this AstroTurf playing football, and my friend lost his phone, and he couldn't find it. When he asked for people, they didn't know where it was. So they had multiple cameras in and around this AstroTurf, and we managed to we were kind of working as detectives. We saw this guy pick it up on the camera, and when he came back, we asked him about it, and luckily it didn't go to needing to call the police or anything. He just sort of owned up and said that he took it. But this is something that even I've actually tried to look at CCTV for a certain reason in the UK before, and you have to have a reason that you assume someone's committed a crime, and then you have to go to the police to ask them if you can look at security cameras. But I don't know if that's the same if it's private ones, maybe not.
I don't know.
For a public area, that's what you have to do. So anyway, we got this phone back pretty easily, and that's just something that you would never think of, these security cameras helping you out in that way. And yeah, it just helps you out. And a lot of people are actually scared to steal stuff because they know they're going to be caught.
Yeah.
When I first bought my electric bike, I was kind of nervous, thinking that if I ever leave it unlocked, that it's going to be stolen. But you can leave it anywhere, and you can be safe to know that it's not getting stolen.
Yeah, I mean,
and if it does,
it's not to say there's no crime here. Of course there is, and there's petty crime. But I remember coming to China maybe 10 or 12 years ago, and there was a lot more sort of petty crime at that time when there wasn't as many cameras. There was always hearing stories of people getting their purses stolen on the metro. I had a friend who somebody cut the lining of his jacket and stole something out of his pocket. And now hear a lot less of those kind of stories since over obviously the last 10 years they've increased the amount of cameras. And I think that what the other thing that Western people tend to forget is that, like, the UK has 2 or 3 big cities, but China has hundreds of big cities. Just the amount of people here, and I think because you would have to have so many police, so they use it as an extension of the police to help the police, and they are developing massive amounts of technology in the fight against crime, and it is decreasing the rate of crime, which in my book is a good thing, really.
You got 2 ways of looking at it. You can say it does intrude on your privacy, it does encroach on your privacy, which it does, but like you said before, should you be worried about that if you're not committing crimes? I don't see any reason why you should be worried about that if you're not committing crimes. I've done a video before about, it's called Is China Safe? So after this, you can go and watch it, but it does go into this sort of more so. And it's about, you know, at home, I lived in the UK, I lived in a city, I lived in a village. In that village, fine, I'd walk around in the evening and not be scared. But even in the nearest town, walking around at 1 a.m, I'd be a little bit sort of on edge.
Yeah.
And in, you know, London, Birmingham, you wouldn't dare at doing that. Whereas here, look, again, we are in first tier cities, so it is a lot safer than some other places might be. You know, fourth, fifth tier cities obviously won't have the same sort of policing, and we haven't lived that experience. So just take note that this could be different, you know, elsewhere. However, from our experience, I can happily walk around at 3 a.m. and it's not even in my mind that people are going to sort of come and mess with me. And yeah, I think that's a good thing. That is a really good thing. And it was one of the things I really noticed when I first arrived. When I first arrived, I would go on walks at night, just sort of like exploring the area. And sometimes 11 at night, I'd see girls 14, 15 years old, and they're walking around just on their phone at night, thinking like no security issue. And that's great that they're able to do that. So yeah, it's just a different perspective on it, because I never really realized that. I never thought about it from that angle before coming here. That was just something I noticed when I was here. Yeah. So a lot of people who have never been, they probably won't think of it from that angle. They'll just think the government's watching you. The government's watching you. It is kind of funny. Thank you everybody for the donations that are coming in. We've had one from Reportify Media, our friend Alex.
Thank you very much, Alex. If you haven't checked out Alex's channel, go and have a look, because he's got some great videos. He's done a whole series on Chongqing. We're actually hoping to get to Chongqing in the not too distant future. Alex is also going back, but he's not able to at the moment. But yeah, some of his videos are good, so go check out his channel.
I just had a comment here. Do they eat many dogs in Guangxi? Oh God, that's one.
Okay, so yeah.
Should we talk about the animals?
Yeah, I mean, dogs are eaten here. I think from my understanding and from what I've spoken to people, a majority of Chinese people do not eat dogs. Yeah, there's certain areas of China where it's more prevalent than others. Most provinces do have dog. In fact, actually, where we were this afternoon, we actually saw a dog being cut up, dog meat being cut up. But actually, what you've also got to remember, it's not exclusively, they're not stealing people's pets and that. Some of these dogs, they have, similar to where there are farms that breed cattle and sheep, there are farms that breed dogs. Now, in a number of provinces now, they've actually taken those off the list of animals that can be eaten and consumed and traded. And it would be nice just to see that rolled out across the whole of China. But you have to get into the mindset. Most Western people find it a problem because they've grown up seeing dogs as pets. Whereas in a lot, especially older Chinese people's minds, they're no different to a sheep or a cow or many European countries eat horse meat. So it's no different to that. So it will take time to sort of change. In the major cities, dogs are pets. A lot of people have dogs, and that's something I've noticed change massively in the 10 or 12 years I've been coming to China. When I first come, I don't remember seeing anybody having dogs as pets. I'd see a few stray dogs running around, but now you can go out and you see lots of people have dogs as pets. So it is changing, and I suspect that the same sort of cycle happened in other countries as well.
I'd imagine so. Yeah, well, you can see that with rabbit. Rabbit used to be a staple meat in the UK, and it's kind of been phased out over time. But I just can't get my head around this. Like, Chinese people who go to university abroad, they're probably asked this question a million times, and they're probably sick of it. And it is a misconception that all Chinese eat cats and dogs and bats.
Another thing what you've got to remember, is that you speak to most younger people, people under the age of 30, they go, oh no, I don't eat dog, I don't eat snake, I don't eat all these weird things, or weirder meals. But the older people do it. And one of the reasons is, rightly or wrongly, a lot of the older people think some of these things have health benefits. And a lot of the time, they're not actually proven. It's just that it's kind of ingrained in them because it's come down the generations. And I've noticed that, although I don't speak Chinese much and I don't read Chinese, I'm aware, and the governments do run adverts saying, look, don't eat these things because they really don't have any health benefits. But yeah, I mean, it will take time. It's not nice to see being a Westerner, dogs being cut up as meat, but you've got to accept that it's because you come from a different mindset. You know, from a small child, you've grown up seeing a dog as a pet, whereas a lot of Chinese people haven't. But just getting back to the amount of people, even if 1% of Chinese people ate dog, that's 1.4 million people, right?
Yeah.
14 million. 14 million people. Because the population is so big, even a very small percentage of a population that does something equals a lot of people. Yeah. You know, so that you have to remember all these things, you know.
Yeah, we see that everywhere, you know, when you've been pushed something from when you're young, it's hard to even when all the scientific evidence is put to you, it's hard to break that innate belief from what you've had when you're young. So yeah, like you said, a lot of these older people do still believe that if they eat I can't come up with them now, but if you eat the heart of a lion, you know, you're going to become, I don't know, stronger, or your bones are going to, I don't know what they are.
So I look at this. So some dishes here are seen as kind of more, I don't know what the word is. I can't think of the word, but let's say, so I went to a restaurant once, and the people I was with, they ordered a dish that was a pig's tongue, and it was quite an expensive dish. I says, look, you know, this is something very, very different from the West. Oh, well, why is this so expensive, this pig's tongue? Because in the UK, I don't know whether we eat pig's tongue, actually. I'm not familiar with that. I know we eat ox tongue, and it's relatively a cheap thing. But the explanation was given is that, oh, well, there's a lot of meat on a pig, but a pig only has one tongue. So it's seen as like a kind of speciality. Yeah. And a lot of the things that Westerners now see that, let's say, for want of a better word, disgusting what Chinese eat, a lot of people in the West used to eat those things, you know, offal, as it's called, which is like the internal organs of animals. You know, it really turns my stomach, but they're staple dishes here in China. But if you go back to wartime in the UK, people ate that because there was no choice. Food wasn't readily available. And I think this again goes back to the times in China when food wasn't as abundant as it is now.
I think this is definitely the reason.
They would kill an animal, and every part of that animal would be eaten. There'd be no waste.
And that's like back to the war times, you know, in England. Yeah. Our grandparents grew up eating every single thing they did, because if they didn't, they were hungry.
The eating habits in China between the older generation and the younger generation are massively different.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. But it takes generations to phase, to change, because it will still be that kids are still brought up to eat every part of the animal, like chicken feet, and oh god, it just turns my stomach when you hear those nails.
Now, we were in a very rural part of China today, and we walked around a market. So just to give you a picture in your head, a market in a rural area is basically people have kind of stalls in front of the place where they live. There'll be a street, there'll be a lot of houses, and the bottom floor will all be kind of a little store. So people have tables, and they will have meat on those tables. They will have, now, I walked around here today. We saw a dog. We saw dog meat. We saw chickens and ducks, but we didn't see anything that was kind of more weird.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't see any pangolins. We didn't see any bats. Actually, this thing about Chinese eating bats, I think, is a bit of a flipping fallacy.
Bit of a myth.
I've never seen anything like that here, and I've spoke to huge amounts of people, and nobody. I think it was a sort of stunt that was done on the internet. But again, this spreads and it gets into people's heads that all Chinese people eat bats, which is actually probably virtually no. If any Chinese people eat bats,
you'd be hard pressed to find someone who did.
But yeah, you can't deny dog meat. You can't deny, chickens, ducks, geese, and things like that. And you will see those live at markets because, again, another thing which is a misunderstanding of the West, Chinese people like things fresh. They have this thing that fresh meat is better.
And you can't freeze meat.
Yeah, and they don't like to eat meat that's been frozen. Many Chinese will say they can tell the difference in quality when you eat fresh meat to frozen meat. So sometimes you've just got to understand that is just the way here. Now, that's not to say there should be, in some areas, maybe the procedures are not as strict as they should be. And that's something that I firmly believe. You go to a market here and let's face it, the hygiene standards are nowhere near what they are in the West.
No,
they're not, but you have to accept that. And I'm sure if you go back 50 years in most Western countries, the hygiene standards were not what they are today.
For sure.
So I think in time the systems here will get better and the hygiene will become better.
Well, it'll be mandatory, and there'll probably be more inspections and stuff. I think there's a lot more laws that cover these kinds of things in the UK because they've been created over such a long period of time and put into place. So but again, it probably will just take a couple of generations.
I think one of the other things, a lot of these laws are already in place in China, but they're not adhered to as strict as Western countries.
Right.
And again, I think that is down to the reason huge populations. It's when you have such huge populations, it's a lot more difficult to enforce rules than it is in much smaller populations. And that's because
I don't know if I agree with you there.
A bigger population has more bad actors. And, you look at like the police trying to fight drug crime in the US, they probably catch a small minority of actually what's going on.
Yeah.
And that's the same here, but the problem is bigger because there's so many
you are
more,
right. There's more bad actors because there's a bigger population. However, I would have assumed that you were right with, it's harder to police because there's more people. But what's in stark contrast to that is the COVID situation. Mm-hmm. They were able to implement things pretty flawlessly, very quickly nationwide. And I don't know why that is. I guess some things they just clamp down on way harder, make top priority, and other things they kind of like let slip down a bit. And once they sort of release the how strict they are on that specific thing, then it will start to come back.
Yes.
And then until they make that a top priority again, it will coming back because there's so many people that are in jobs and employed because of whatever it is, because
unfortunately wild animal trade worldwide is a big business. I am putting together a video on this at some point. I'm getting all my facts and figures together, but it's a very interesting thing, and a lot of people think it's an open thing. It actually isn't. It does go on here, but a lot of it is like an underground business here because it actually is illegal. A lot of these wild animals are illegal to trade and consume here. And that's actually not what the West thinks. The West thinks it's like there's markets with like huge amount of these wild animals being traded. Well, actually, that is not the case. That it goes on, but a lot of it is underground because people who do get caught are severely punished. But it does go on,
Let's move on. We got another super chat from Noobish Pinky. Thank you very much there. How are the toilets in China? How come kids do their business outside? Well, that is interesting you say that. I've noticed that there are definitely less public toilets than the West. However, there's not to say that the standard of the toilets are any worse.
It depends where you go.
It does depend where you go. And there are some horrible toilets, public toilets here, and there are some horrible public toilets back home.
Yeah. I mean,
hold on one second.
Yeah, go on.
And about the kids doing their business, in Shenzhen, not a great deal. However, whenever I do go out of Shenzhen into more local areas, more rural areas, I do see that a little bit more. Even when I've seen one time since I've been here, a kid doing a poo on the side of the road, and I've seen multiple kids doing wheeze, and I don't really see the weeing as a problem, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, this goes on a lot.
People, that happens.
Yeah, I can remember when I'd been young. When you were young, we'd have to stop the car somewhere because you burst in to go to the toilet and you get outside of the road.
Even guys do it now, of course.
But I think it's about education. Younger parents are more switched on to the fact that
for sure,
it's not the right thing to do. But just going back to the toilets, right? There are some very bad public toilets here. There is a massive shortage in public areas of public toilets in China. That you go into a city centre in the UK and lots of stores will have toilets. There'll be public toilets. There are, in my opinion, a lot less here.
There are, without a doubt.
But you go to more rural areas and you might go to public toilets, and they're not the best. They're not they're a bit smelly. They're not great. But actually, I can remember many times I've been to the UK. Now, the situation's changed in the UK. Most motorway services have got reasonably hygienic public toilets in the UK. But that wasn't the case 15, 20 years ago. I remember turning up to, motorway services in the UK, and they'd be disgraceful. The toilets was there. One thing I will say, where the Chinese toilet for Westerners is very difficult. They're squat toilets. But they're actually probably much more hygienic than a Western toilet.
I think so.
Because you don't make any contact with the toilet itself.
Yeah.
So that's something that is quite different.
Although I can't make that change. I do always prefer a Western toilet.
Yeah, I mean, it is difficult for Westerners to use a squat toilet. But actually, from a hygiene point of view, and actually a lot of Chinese will squat on Western toilets. They will stand on the seat.
Yeah, because they're used to that hygiene thing. It's a thing, and we see it every day without fail. The weirdness. What is it? Germophobia. That's the word for people who don't learn. Yeah. It's as if the standard here, the standard for a person is to have germophobia. It's like at home, people don't really worry about germs as much, but here it's like top priority at all times.
They are more conscious about it here.
Yeah, very much so.
Which is kind of strange.
A lot of people will notice if you put a bag on the chair or on the bed, or you have your shoes when you're walking around. There's a lot of sort of things where people are much more nervous about germs here. But we could probably cover that in a whole another video, to be honest, because it is amusing at times, to be honest. But anyway, that's for another video. Javier, thank you very much for the super sticker there. We probably will be finishing this up in the next sort of 10 minutes or so. So if you do have any questions for us, be sure to get them in as soon as possible. As well as there is the WeChat code down in the description for anybody who isn't able to donate through the super chat feature. But it's great to see that even we are doing the live stream this week at a completely different time, to see many of you tuning in still, and hopefully a lot more people from the UK, European countries are able to join in. It seems that this time zone does sort of suit more people, but I think because people are used to our stream being at a different time, maybe but it'd be good if you can let us know in the chat and in the comments which one you prefer. Maybe we'll do a poll after this and see which one most people prefer, sort of an evening slot or a morning slot for China.
Okay, Xiaoxin Ran. Okay, so I do believe what you're saying there.
Sorry, Shanyue Gao, thank you for the super sticker as well.
So I do want to address this, is that I do believe most people in China trusted in their government and listened to what their government said. And I think that's one of the reasons, people people did really abide by the lockdowns, and they did follow the government to the word pretty much most of the time. And I think that did help a lot, where I see that's not the case in many Western countries. There are a lot more people flouting the lockdown, and it's actually led in the UK now to the government suggesting if people don't start complying, they will have to make the lockdown more severe. But
it's a strange psychological thing. It's like sometimes people just want to rebel for the sake of it, even though they don't really have any good reason to do it. It's like we are brought up in a society where you are to be an individual, you are to have your own thoughts on things and your own opinions and what have you. But when it comes to sort of not wanting to obey the isolation things, I just can't get my head around it. And people's perception is that it's taken away their rights, which, yeah, it is true. But give a better reason as to why those rights shouldn't be taken away temporarily. Is it better to just allow everyone to do what they want to do and all the uncivilized, undereducated people just run wild and spread it throughout the whole country and way more people die? Or is it better to temporarily restrict people's rights? I don't know. That I've not really made my mind up, but you can sort of make your own mind up about that one. Chris Pilibala, thank you very much. Hi from Sweden, and appreciate your support for China. Thank you very much for the generosity there. So, as I said, we are probably finishing this up in about 10 minutes time. So have you got any sort of things you want to discuss before we close this? I can't believe we've been running for an hour and a quarter already.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, we'll do a poll to see which time suits people best. Just let you know what we're doing this week. We've still got a couple of our Shanghai videos to upload, so hope you have a look at those. And if there's anything any topics you want us to cover in videos or things, just drop some comments.
Yeah, well,
we always consider, actually, a lot of the ideas for our videos are generated by comments we get on the videos we upload. Somebody will mention, I thought, oh yeah, that's a good idea, let's address that subject, etc. So yeah.
I just want to answer a couple of questions here that are not actually super chats. I joined a bit late. When is the next live stream? We are doing a live stream every Sunday in China. You'll have to keep an eye on our community section as to when the time of that will be, because this one is a slightly different time to usual. But yeah, every Sunday. And we are going to be putting these onto all podcasting platforms very soon. So if you are not able to tune in live, you can always listen to the podcast.
And we leave it up on the channel after, but sometimes it takes sort of 12, 15 hours to process through the YouTube system. So it's not always available directly after, I think.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So always look out for it.
This is one I'll pass to you. So how will Brexit affect UK's relationship with China, do you think?
Well, before the pandemic, I think Britain and the UK were quite, had a good relationship with China, but it seems as though the current government, there's a number of voices in there sort of saying that, we need to reevaluate our relationship with China. Now, my opinion on that is that they just trying to deflect from what's going on in the UK at the moment, but I hope it won't. China and Southeast Asia are where the growth engine is, not the Europe. Europe has very slow growth, so I really hope our government will get behind doing much more business with China and Southeast Asia in general. Our big exporters and that. I think it could be good.
It is really, it's a crazy couple of years. Like, you've had Brexit, you've had the Hong Kong situation, you've had this epidemic. It's like, it's all happening. It's all happening. And I think it's just, I'm interested to see what people are going to be like after this sort of cleans up a bit.
Yeah, I think there'll be a lot of sort of looking hard at how certain countries' governments have dealt with this, and I think there'll be a lot that comes out of that at the end of it.
Yeah, I think so. All right, we do need to wrap this up because the battery on the camera is going to run out, and we don't want to leave you high and dry. So
we're waiting for a mains adapter to come, but it didn't arrive. So, but yeah.
Anyway, so thank you all very much for joining us on this episode of Let's Talk China. This is going to be left up, so you are able to watch this after as well if you weren't able to catch the whole thing. We will have a video up tomorrow, so make sure you watch out for that. And
and next week we have a guest, which is
of course,
so keep an eye on the community post. We have a guest next week. He's not a YouTuber, but he's a guy who's lived in China for about 16, 17 years. He has a lot of interesting things to say. He has a lot of strong opinions. So rev up your questions for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that one is actually going to be online as well. So that'll be an interesting one, because we are trying to have some where it's just us and then some where we have guests as well. So hopefully you all enjoyed this episode, and we will see you in the next one. Take care for now.
Take care.